So we're going to be creating a digital diorama or a sort of paper cutout looking piece of artwork in Illustrator. And this is my favorite diorama of all time, Lisa Simpson's Edgar Allan Poe. And so just to get you familiarized with traditional dioramas and what they look like, this is my friend Daisy, who makes beetle dioramas, and she teaches classes actually on how to make them with real dead beetles. And then here's maybe what you think of as a school project, or if you've done with your kids or you did when you were little, traditional diorama. And this is kind of what we're going for in Illustrator. Some people call it like a paper cutout effect. Here's another cool one. So we're going to be creating layers and making shadows. And I think it looks really cool. You can do a lot with it. You'll have the choice of what your imagery will be, but you just have to create this kind of layered effect in Illustrator. So we're also going to talk about depth of field, which is used in photography a lot. So maybe you have learned it before, and it's basically you're telling the viewer what to focus on. So you're picking which part of your image is in focus, and a narrow depth of field has only a small part of the image in focus, and a wide depth of field has a large part of the image in focus. So we can just see, like with this one, the eye is in focus and the stuff in the foreground and the background are blurry, so it's really telling us to focus and look on the eye. And then this one, there's only a very small part of the image in focus, everything else is blurry, so it creates an interesting effect. So you're going to be picking a focal point in your image and make everything else around it blurry. So you're really telling the viewer where to look. This is an example of a wide depth of field. So for landscape and cityscapes, you usually do something with a wide depth of field where most of the image is in focus and you're not just focusing on one small part. And you can see this is an example of a landscape with a lot of the image in focus. And then this is more what we're gonna do, where just a few of one section of the image is in focus and the rest is blurry. So we're really telling the viewer where to look and what to focus on. Okay, so you need to build at least 3 levels, a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. And I suggest putting them all in their own layers just to make your life easier, because we're gonna do the depth of field and add different blurs to each. So I'm gonna make this first layer, I'm gonna call it foreground. And also then you can move the layers around. And I'm going to use the curvature tool. So it looks like the pen tool, but with a little line on it, a little curvy line. So I'm clicking on the curvature tool, and what the curvature tool does is it just automatically makes curves. You just have to click, you don't have to pull out the handle. So it's just a quick way of making curves. Let me change the color here. Give this a little bit of a blue, turn that around, and I want no stroke. So I'm just making waves, and then of course you can come back with the direct selection, and you can move stuff around however you want. But this is just a quick way. I'm gonna make some like waves and a whale for my diorama. So that's gonna be the foreground waves, and then I'm gonna make a new layer here, and I'll call this middle waves, and I can drag it below the foreground and make sure I'm selected on that with the little meatball here. And let me get the curvature tool, and I'm going to make the color, I can double click on this and make the color just a little bit darker. And now I'm just gonna, so I'm just clicking and it's making the curves as I'm clicking. And then I'm just coming out to the edges to complete it. Oh, whoops. Be careful, because I connected it accidentally to the other shape. So to fix that. And then I can make background waves. So I'll make a new layer, move it to the bottom and call it back waves. And you can name yours whatever you want. Let me just click out of here so I'm not selected on it. And let me grab this color, make it darker, and come into my curvature tool. And I'm just clicking and it's making the curves based on where I'm clicking. So I'm not dragging out any kind of handles to make these curves. And then I'm just completing it. Let me zoom out a little bit so I can. Okay, so that's the curvature tool and a quick way to make waves. You can, of course, use the pen tool or shape builder tool, however you want. So the next thing we're going to do is the character design. Now your character can be whatever you want. You can start with a drawing. You can start with just building it in Illustrator. I have a drawing here, so I'm calling it whale drawing. I'm going to come into V and just select out of here. And I want this to actually be somewhere in the middle. Yeah, maybe I'll have it here because the whale is going to be my focal point. So you can see having these all on different layers makes it easy to move them around. And since we're layering these up to make it look kind of like a 3D diorama, having them on different layers and having that option to move them around will make your life a lot easier. So I have this drawing that I brought into Illustrator and I have it locked, but I can still move the layers around. So I'm going to use it to kind of trace my whale. So I'm actually going to turn the foreground layer off just so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to make a new layer on top and call it whale, because this will be my actual Illustrator whale that I'm building. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. You can of course use the pen tool, you can use the curvature tool, but I just want to show you some ways to make some details that might help you build your shapes a little bit easier. I'm going to lock everything else just so I'm only working on the one layer of my whale. So a way to build, I'm going to build these little like details here on the fin, and I'm going to build it with the ellipse tool. So I'm going to draw two overlapping ellipses. I'm just going to make them outlined for now so you can see what I'm doing. And on the part that's overlapping is what's going to become this shadow shape. So I think I'm still in the ellipse tool and I'm drawing another ellipse. So I'm thinking about where it's overlapping and how that's going to look. So let's see. So I'm thinking about this area right here, and you can spend a lot more time making yours look great. I'm going to make another one here. And two overlapping shapes again. And I'm just moving it around. I'm still in the ellipse tool moving it around, so you can either stay in the ellipse tool or you can press V and get in your selection tool to adjust them. But if you're making multiples, sometimes it's easier. Okay, I think this is fine for the demo. I think you'll get the idea. So what I can then do is press V to be in my selection. I can select both of these. I can come into my Pathfinder and I can do exclude. So it's the last one on the top. And now they're grouped together, and the way this works, you have to go into the isolation mode. So I need to double click, so I'm in this isolation mode here, and now we can see it's broken it up into different shapes, into different sections. So I can click on the part that I don't want and just hit delete. And now this becomes my little shape. I can switch it to fill, and of course you can see you can spend more time making yours look awesome. And then I can come back out of there. You can also press escape to get out of there, and I can select this. I can do exclude, double click to get into that isolation mode, and now you can see it's highlighted on the parts that it's been separated into, it's been broken up to. So I can click the part I don't want, hit delete, I can click on here and fill it. And now I want to cut off the top, and so it fits into the fin shape. So I'm going to show you just a different tool for this, just to show you different ways of doing things. So I'm just going to take the line segment tool, and I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to click and drag a line from the top to the bottom of the fin, and then I'm going to use the reshape tool. So that's under the scale tool, might be on top, so you just have to right click and get the reshape tool. And what the reshape tool does is it takes this and just makes anchor points. So I'm just clicking on it, and it's just going to make an anchor point wherever I click. And you can, so it keeps the line the same length from the start to the finish, and it just lets you add some curves in there. So that's an interesting way of making a line. I can see that I don't have this filled with anything, so let me fill it with a color so you can see what's happening. Okay, so now I have the line for the fin, and I want to keep this line for the fin. I'm going to come into my selection and get out of there. So I want to keep this line, but I also want to use the line to cut off the top of this to make it even, right? So what I need to do is make a copy of this line so I can keep it. I'm going to copy, paste in front, and lock it. And then we'll select the copy of it and use it to cut it off. You will see. So to copy is Control C. To paste in front is Control F. And then to lock is Control 2. And you can get all of those up here: edit, copy, edit, paste in front, and then object, lock. Okay, so you can see if I click on this, now there's 2 lines and one is locked. I can't even click on it. So I'm going to do Control Z to get that line back to where I want it. I'm going to select on all of these, and then I'm going to come into my Pathfinder and I'm going to divide it up. And I need to get into isolation mode, so I'm double clicking to get into here. And now you can see it's divided into different shapes that I can choose the same way as before. So I can just click that top and delete, click the top and delete. And now I can get out of here, out of the isolation mode. You can also press escape. And to unlock it, you can just come to Object, Unlock All, or I could have gone into my layers and unlocked it. So now I still have that line, but I've used the line as a guide to cut off the top of that. And then if you have bumps in yours, like let's say, let me make this bumpy so you can see what I'm talking about. So let's say you had like a ton of anchor points. Okay, I'm just gonna add a bunch of anchor points on here. And then I'm gonna come to A, and let's say you just have a bunch of stuff going on. And maybe if you image trace something and you don't love the way it looks, you can use the smooth tool. So the smooth tool is underneath the shaper tool with the pencil tool. Looks like this. And you just kind of draw, and it removes some of the anchor points, and it basically does what it says. It smooths it out so you can keep on going over one spot until you get it right. So that's just a good way to reduce the anchor points. Another way, if you end up with a lot of anchor points and it's not looking simplified, obviously I should have used the smooth tool before I cut off the top, but I think you guys can get the idea with that. Another way to simplify is you can select the shapes that you want to simplify, and you can go to Object, Path, Simplify. And this box comes up, you can check preview, and it's telling you the original had 22 points and the new one has 8 points. So this is a great way to reduce anchor points if you have a lot going on. I don't like the way that looks, but you can adjust yours. So just so you know, you have lots of different options, and you can see how that's changing the shape. So you can simplify yours more or less and make it look exactly how you want. So you can build your character, any character you want, in whatever way you want. You can use the pen tool, you can use these different curvature tools, you can build it in a more intuitive way, or you can just trace it with the pen tool. It's totally up to you. So I'm going to quickly show you how Live Paint works if you haven't used Live Paint before. It's an easy way to color things and also to cut stuff up and make groups. So it's an intuitive way to color, and if you have a lot of pieces in your art, it can really help. So you can make any shapes. This can work with any shapes, and if you want to use them to Live Paint, you just select them all, and then you can come into the Live Paint bucket, and once you click on the Live Paint bucket, that automatically makes them a Live Paint shape. So the Live Paint bucket is under the Shape Builder tool. So now we can see this shows up and these little swatches show up. There's 3, and you toggle between them using the left and right arrow key. And if you look up here in my swatch panel while I'm doing that, it's automatically toggling between them. I can go all the way through. You can use gradients, you can use whatever you want. And then if you have different folders here, you just do the down arrow to get through your different folders. So for this, you really want to set up your swatches, and you can get more swatches by coming here to this little book thing. And maybe for mine, I might want beach swatches. So to get them into my swatches to make them usable for Live Paint, I can just drag the folder into here. And you can put as many as you want in here. So this is a really good way to set yourself up and get yourself ready, get your swatches ready so you can use the Live Paint. So now I'm in the folder I want to be in, and I'm just the one in the center, so I'm just using the right and left arrow keys to pick my swatch. So the one in the center is what it's going to turn into. And you can see I can just click, and then the Live Paint bucket is more intuitive because it's picking these visual shapes, not the entire ellipse that I've drawn, which if I colored it in normally with the direct selection tool, it would color in the whole ellipse. It's picking out all these different overlapping shapes. So I can just toggle through and make it whatever color I want. And remember, I can press the up arrow to get to the different folder. And one thing that might be annoying is that it's coloring where the arrow is, not where the paint bucket is, which might, so I thought I was trying to color this little piece, but I actually colored this because that's where my arrow was. So I need to get the arrow, the different color so you can actually see arrow in the spot I want it to be. And that is an easy way to color your artwork, especially if you have a lot going on. Now, if you want to change the stroke, you just hold Shift, and you can see how it changes into a little paintbrush. So I'm holding Shift, and while I'm holding Shift down, I'm toggling through with the arrow key, and then I'm pressing on the stroke. So you can see it's coloring each different stroke, and you can see you can do the patterns or the gradients, whatever, or you can do really whatever you want. And you can color each one differently. So this is really a quick way, especially if you set up your swatches, to get your artwork colored. It's sort of like a dynamic shape. You can move things around. So I can come into V, my selection tool, and I can double click to be in the isolation mode. And when I move this shape around, you can see that the colors are moving with it. You can especially see in here. So it's a live tool, and it's moving the stroke and the colors with the shape as they're overlapping. So this is a really awesome tool, time-saving tool, especially if you have super complex drawings. You can also delete, like the way we did with the fin, you can delete with this. So I'm gonna come out of here, I'm gonna select everything, and this is also another way to get into Live Paint. So first I'm gonna Object, Expand, just press OK, and then Object, Live Paint, Make, just press OK, and then one more step, Object, Live Paint, Expand. Now that I have this, I can double click to get into that isolation mode, first I have to ungroup. So right click, ungroup, right click, ungroup until ungroup is no longer available. Okay, so now I can just select and delete this. I can delete out the interior space. You can delete the stroke. You can really delete anything you want. So you can do a lot with this. You can see there's a lot of different ways. You know, find your way of working that makes sense for how your brain works and for how you like to build your designs. So a good way to add shadows and highlights and more details to your character or anything in your illustration is by using the knife tool, which is here under the eraser tool. So you right click on the eraser tool to get to the knife tool. And to use this, it has to be a live paint object. So mine already is, but if yours isn't, make sure to go to Object, Expand. Then you'll go to Object, Live Paint, Make, and then Object, Live Paint, Expand. So those 3 steps, okay? So then I'm selected on it, I'm pressing the knife tool, and the knife tool works within one color. So you want to keep your lines within one color. So I'm going to add a little shadow shape to the bottom. So I'm just drawing, and if you have a pen tablet, this will probably look better than mine does with my crappy mouse. And then I'm pressing V to select. And you can see I'm not able to select into it because I need to be in isolation mode. So I just need to double click. And now I can select on just this part, this section that I made, and I can make it a different color. And then I can come out of my isolation mode by pressing Escape, and I can come in, select the whole thing, and with my knife tool, I can make a highlight. And obviously for yours, you will spend a lot more time making yours look great. And then I can double click on here to get in my isolation mode. I can select just the top part, and I can make it a lighter color to make it a highlight. And I'm just making these really bold so you can see what I'm doing, but you can make yours really subtle. You can add cut it up as much as you want with the knife tool and make it look really awesome. So that's a great way to add detail. Okay, so now we're going to make it look more diorama-like by adding shadows and blur. So I'm going to turn on these wave layers that I had created, and I'm also going to make a background layer for the sky. So drag it all the way to the bottom, call it sky, and I'm just going to make a rectangle, and I can do the draw behind mode. Well, it's on the behind layer, so it's going to be drawn behind anyway, but just make a square there so it's back there, and obviously you can adjust all the colors that you want. So I'm going to come to this foreground and I'm going to select on it, and I have my appearance panel expanded up here so you can see what I'm doing. So there's a couple ways you can make the drop shadow. You can either go to Effect, Stylize, Drop Shadow, or I'm going to work in the appearance panel because I think it's easier. So I'm going to come to the FX here in the appearance panel when I'm selected on that layer, go to Stylize, Drop Shadow. You definitely want to turn the preview on. So remember the Y axis, you want to affect the Y offset and the X X axis offset. So the Y axis, you can think of the tail of the Y as pointing down, so that's like the vertical one. So you can adjust them with the arrows, or you can also type in numbers here. So if you maybe that's not enough, you can do like 0.05 and then click into another box to see how that looks. So you can remember that number. Now the shadow is going to give you a sense of space and distance. So think about how far away each layer is from each other and be really intentional about how your shadows look and how they're spaced out. Because the bigger the shadow, so if I make this a bigger shadow, see how that looks like this foreground wave is further away from the one behind it. So think about the space that you're creating, how far away things are from each other, how far away the shadow is, and what kind of depth you're creating. So you can make it as deep or as not deep as you want. You can affect the blur here, like maybe you don't want it so blurry. So you can make it 04, just see how that looks, you know, and that can make it a little bit sharper. That's really all, these are all your creative choices, so it's really up to you. You can also affect the X offset. So think about maybe where the light is coming from, think about the details of your objects where there's going to be highlights and shadows, and press OK. And you're going to add the drop shadow to each one. So I'm selecting on this layer in the appearance panel, and you know, maybe this one is closer to the one in the back. So I'm going to make it, oops, go the other way. So that looks like it's a little bit closer, and press OK. And then you're going to do it on each layer. And maybe this one is super close. And maybe the blur is a little less. So maybe it's a little sharper because it's that close. So really play around with this and get it looking exactly how you want. You obviously want the object to have a shadow on it. And think about where this is in relation to the other things around it. I'm just going to press OK for now. And then, you know, if you had like a sun or a moon hanging up here, maybe it's super far away from the background, right? So this drop shadow would be really far away. And the blur would be higher. You know, so think about how the offset is and how far away it is from the background, because you can make this look like it's hanging all the way in front in line with this foreground if the shadow is blurrier and further away. So really think about your space that you're creating, where things are, where the light is, what the shadows are going to look like for each. And then to create the depth of field, we're going to pick which object is in focus, which layer is in focus. And for mine, I'm going to have my character in focus, the whale. So I've written in my layer, I've just written focus, so I know that that one is going to stay in focus. And now everything else is going to be blurry to create that really narrow depth of field. So we're keeping just the character in focus and other stuff blurry. So I'm selected on my foreground here. I'm coming to the FX, blur, Gaussian blur, and preview. And you can see that the shadow is getting messed up. So I'll show you how to fix that. So I'm going to do about 4. Press OK. And that shadow looks terrible. So all I need to do to fix that is I'm coming into my appearance panel, I'm selecting on the blur, and I'm just dragging it above the shadow. And see, there, that looks better. You could have also done the blur first. So then the one behind it, I'm going to add a blur to also, and I'm going to make that the same 4 because they're kind of the same distance from the character. And then I'm going to drag this on top. And then the one in the background will probably be even more blurry because it's further away, right? So you're thinking about your space, what's far away, what's close. And so maybe I'll make that 6. And then I'm just taking the blur. That didn't change it too much, but I think I'm gonna drag it above in the appearance panel just to make things look okay. So you can blur yours as much or as little as you want, but just I want you to have a focal point, and I want you to have some stuff in the background at least blurred, and really be intentional about how big your shadows are, how blurry stuff is. You're going to add a lot more detail to yours, so I'm just showing you the basics here, but I want to see a lot of detail with the knife tool, with the different shapes that you're creating. And I want you to get super creative with building your character and what kind of diorama, paper cutout object you're making, what kind of artwork you're making. All right, have fun.